Welcome to Fear Spiral. It was supposed to be a routine cleanup. That SWAT detective Ryan Cole told himself when he stepped back into the house on Willow Creek Road. The same house where the air still hung heavy, a grim cocktail of iron and smoke. He'd read the report a dozen times. The murder had been solved, or at least, that's what the official paperwork claimed. A jealous husband, a missing wife, one horrifically bloody kitchen, case closed. The neat little bow on top of a tragic, messy package. But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling, that persistent itch at the back of his mind. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. As he walked across the floorboards, the sound of his boots echoed through the oppressive stillness. The house felt cavernous, empty. Forensics had been thorough. Everything had been bagged, tagged, and carted away. The scene was scrubbed, sanitized, but the ghost of the violence remained. He did a slow sweep of the main floor, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, searching for the loose thread he knew was there. He passed through the living room, into the dining area, and that's when he saw it. Everything except for one thing. Tucked just under the heavy oak dining table, almost invisible against the dark wood, was a single black leather glove. Ryan stopped, his breath catching in his throat. He frowned, a deep furrow creasing his brow. How the hell did they miss this? He muttered to the empty room. This was sloppy. Unforgivably sloppy for a crime scene this high-profile. He knelt, the floorboards groaning under his weight, and pulled out a fresh evidence bag. With practiced care, he used his pen to nudge the glove from its hiding place. It was sleek, made of fine supple leather, expensive. He carefully maneuvered it into the clear plastic bag. The glove was cold. Not just cool from the ambient temperature of the house, but unnaturally cold. A deep, penetrating chill that seemed to seep through the plastic. He sealed the bag with a sharp zip, and as soon as his fingers pressed the seal shut, he felt it. A faint rhythmic thrum against the pads of his fingers. A pulse. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stared at the bag in his hand, his mind refusing to process what his senses were screaming at him. It felt alive, like the glove itself was breathing. A slow, steady, impossible heartbeat emanating from the cold, empty leather. He snatched his hand back as if burned, the evidence bag dropping to the floor with a soft thud. He stared at it, his rational mind warring with the undeniable sensation he'd just experienced. It had to be a trick of the mind. Stress, lack of sleep. He reached for it again, hesitating for a fraction of a second before his fingers closed around the bag. There it was again. Thump thump, thump thump, a steady, living pulse. This was no ordinary glove. This wasn't just a missed piece of evidence. This was something else entirely. Something that defied all logic, all reason. He realized with a dawning, icy horror that the case wasn't closed. It wasn't even close. That night, sleep was a distant country Ryan couldn't reach. He padded into the kitchen, the floorboards cool beneath his feet, and poured himself a generous drink. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, a small, controlled storm. He set the glove on the granite counter, the single light above glinting off its worn surface, and just stared. It looked so ordinary, so mundane, just old, cracked leather, the kind you'd find in any forgotten corner of an old house. There were faint, dried stains along the cuff, dark and ambiguous. What secrets did they hold? Who had worn this? The question circled in his mind, refusing to land. Then, the shrill ring of the phone sliced through the silence. It made him jump, his heart lurching into his throat. He fumbled for the receiver, his hands slick with condensation from his glass. "Cole," he answered, his voice a little shaky. The name was an old habit, a shield he'd used for years, a name that wasn't his. On the other end, there was nothing but a faint, crackling static, like the sound of a distant, dying fire. He was about to hang up, chalking it up to a wrong number, when a whisper slithered through the line. It was soft, unnervingly clear, as if the person were standing right beside him. "You found it." A cold dread, sharp and immediate, washed over Ryan. He froze, the glass in his hand feeling impossibly heavy. Every muscle in his body tensed. "Who is this?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady, but failing. The whisper came again, laced with something that sounded like ancient malice. "You shouldn't have taken what isn't yours." The words hung in the air for a moment, a chilling promise. Then, the line went dead, replaced by the monotonous drone of the dial tone. Ryan's hand trembled as he slowly lowered the phone back into its cradle. His eyes darted back to the counter, to the spot where he'd left the glove, but it was empty. The glove was gone. Panic began to bubble up in his chest, hot and suffocating. He scanned the kitchen, his eyes wide, searching every shadow, every corner. It couldn't just vanish. He ran his hand over the smooth, cold granite where it had been just moments before. Nothing. It was as if it had never been there at all. Had he imagined it? Was the lack of sleep, the drink, finally getting to him? No. The phone call was real, the voice was real, and the empty space on his counter was terrifyingly real. He wasn't alone. He had brought something back with him from that old house. Something more than just a piece of leather. He had taken something that belonged to someone or something else, and now, it seemed they wanted it back. The house, once his sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sent a fresh jolt of fear through him. He was a trespasser in his own home. He backed away from the counter, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, filled with the presence of the unseen. He could feel eyes on him, a cold, analytical gaze that seemed to pierce right through the walls. The whisper echoed in his memory, a relentless loop. You shouldn't have taken what isn't yours. He had opened a door he never should have touched, and now, whatever was on the other side had followed him home. The night was far from over. In fact, he had a sinking feeling it had just begun. He'd found it in the attic of a house he was clearing out, an ordinary, worn-out thing tucked away in a dusty corner. He didn't think much of it at first. He just tossed it into a box with other discarded items, sealed it up, and loaded it onto his truck. The job was done, and he headed home, ready to forget the day. But that evening, as he was unwinding, he saw it. The glove. It was sitting on his coffee table, perfectly placed, as if waiting for someone. He froze. How did it get there? The box was still sealed in the back of his truck. Shaking his head, he told himself he must have brought it in by mistake. A simple, logical explanation. He grabbed the glove, its leather cold and strangely stiff, walked outside, and threw it into the trash can. He made sure the lid was secure, then went back inside, locking the door behind him. Problem solved, right? The next morning, Ryan walked into his kitchen to make coffee, and his heart nearly stopped. There it was again, on the kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl, the glove. Its fingers were slightly curled, almost like a beckoning hand. This wasn't a mistake, this was impossible. A wave of cold dread washed over him. He felt like he was being watched, like he wasn't alone in his own house. Panic began to set in. He snatched the glove, his hands trembling, and ran to his car. This time, he wouldn't just throw it away. He drove miles out of town to the old bridge overlooking the river. With all his might, he hurled the glove into the deep, fast-moving water below. He watched it disappear beneath the surface, a tiny dark shape swallowed by the current. He stayed there for a long time, just to be sure. The sound of the rushing water, a comforting roar. Finally, he drove home, the knot in his stomach slowly starting to unwind. He felt a sense of relief, a belief that it was finally over. That night, for the first time in days, Ryan felt he could truly relax. He put on a movie, tried to laugh, and tried to convince himself the whole ordeal was just a product of an overactive imagination. Maybe he was just stressed from work. As the movie credits rolled, he felt a draft. He checked the windows all closed, but the feeling persisted, a cold spot in the room that seemed to follow him. He stood up, a shiver running down his spine, and looked toward the front door. And that's when he saw it. A small puddle of water was spreading across the floor, and in the middle of it, dripping and dark, sat the glove. It was back. Soaked, but undeniably there. It wasn't just a glove anymore. It was a presence. It was a threat. He backed away slowly, his mind racing. How could it have returned from the river? This defied all logic, all reason. He knew he couldn't just throw it away again. It would always come back. He had to understand what it wanted. With a deep breath, he approached it. The water around it had a faint, murky smell of the river. He didn't touch it this time. He just stood there staring at it, his fear slowly being replaced by a grim determination. "What do you want?" he whispered into the empty room. The glove just sat there, silent, its leather dark and heavy with water. He decided on a new plan. He couldn't destroy it. He couldn't get rid of it. So maybe he needed to contain it. He found an old, heavy-duty toolbox in his garage, one with a sturdy lock. Carefully, using a pair of tongs, he picked up the dripping glove and placed it inside. He snapped the lock shut, then, for good measure, wrapped the entire box in heavy chains. He dragged the heavy container down to his basement, placed it in the furthest, darkest corner, and piled old furniture on top of it. It felt extreme, but what else could he do? He was a prisoner in his own home, haunted by an inanimate object. Days turned into a week. Life started to feel normal again. No strange appearances, no cold spots, no sense of being watched. Ryan began to believe he had finally won. The memory of the glove started to fade, becoming more like a bad dream than a real event. One night he was woken by a faint rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from below, from the basement. His blood ran cold. He knew with absolute certainty what it was. He crept down the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound grew louder as he approached the basement door. Thump, thump. It was the sound of something heavy, something metallic, being struck from the inside. He opened the door, and the sound was clear now, echoing in the darkness. It was coming from the corner where he'd buried the toolbox. As his eyes adjusted, he saw it. The pile of furniture was shaking, and the chains around the toolbox were rattling with each powerful, rhythmic strike from within. It was trying to get out, and Ryan knew, in that terrifying moment, that this was far from over. It was just the beginning. For Detective Ryan Miller, that feeling started with a glove, a single mud-caked leather glove, logged as evidence from the abandoned house in Willow Creek, a seemingly ordinary object from a closed case. But this glove was anything but ordinary. Cut to a close-up of a man's face, Ryan looking exhausted and terrified. He's in his kitchen, the early morning light is weak. The first night, he found it on his kitchen counter, miles from the precinct's secure evidence lockup. He'd dismissed it as exhaustion, a trick of a sleep-deprived mind. He'd carefully placed it back in its evidence bag, locked it in his car's glove compartment, and driven it back to the precinct, securing it in the steel locker himself. He'd watched the heavy door click shut. The tumblers engage, safe, secure. Show a quick sequence. Ryan finding the glove on his counter, placing it in an evidence bag, locking it in his car, then in a locker at the precinct. The next morning he found it hanging from his rearview mirror, gently swaying. The mud was still damp. Panic began to claw at the edges of his professional calm. This was impossible. He repeated the process, his hands shaking this time. He documented everything, took photos, and even placed a secondary high-security lock on the evidence locker. He told himself there had to be a rational explanation. A prank, a disgruntled colleague with a key and a twisted sense of humor. Show Ryan finding the glove in his car. His face shows growing fear. He is seen taking photos and adding a bigger lock to the locker. By the third morning, the rationalizations had evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal fear. He woke up to the soft, leathery touch of the glove resting on his pillow, right next to his face. It was no longer just an object, it was a presence. It was hunting him. The smell of damp earth and something else, something sickly sweet, filled his bedroom. He scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Show a dramatic shot of the glove on the pillow next to a sleeping Ryan. He wakes up and recoils in horror, shaking, his professional composure shattered. He grabbed his phone. There was only one person he could trust, one person who might believe his descent into what felt like madness. He dialed forensics officer Dana Ruiz, his oldest friend at the precinct. Her voice was a welcome anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. "Dana, it's Ryan." Show Ryan on the phone, pacing his living room, looking disheveled and frantic. "Ryan, you sound awful. What's up?" He took a shaky breath. "Dana, I think something's wrong with that evidence from Willow Creek, the old Henderson case. We closed that months ago." "Wrong, how?" "It keeps showing up. The glove, the leather glove. I left it locked up, I swear, but it keeps..." He hesitated, the words feeling insane even as he formed them. "It keeps moving. It's following me, Dana. I just found it on my pillow." Close up on Ryan's face, a mix of desperation and fear. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. He could picture her, brow furrowed, running through every logical possibility. He braced for disbelief, for the suggestion he take a long overdue vacation. Instead, when she finally spoke, her voice was a barely audible whisper, laced with a fear that mirrored his own. "Ryan," she started, her voice trembling, "listen to me very carefully. We never found any gloves at the scene." His blood ran cold. His heart felt like it stopped beating. What are you talking about?" "I logged it myself. Item 7B, one left-handed leather work glove." "No." Dana's voice was firm but terrified. "I was there. I processed the whole scene with you. There were no gloves in that house, Ryan. We searched everything. The official evidence manifest is blank for item 7B. There are no gloves." The final shot holds on Ryan's face, his eyes wide with utter terror as he slowly turns to look at the glove, which is now sitting on his coffee table, seemingly watching him. The implication hangs in the air. If the police never found a glove, then whose glove has been following him? That night, I drove back to Willow Creek. The old house stood silhouetted against a sliver of moon, looking even more menacing than I remembered. It had been condemned, yellow crime tape fluttering like trapped ghosts in the cold, biting wind. I pushed the door open, the hinges screaming in protest. With a flashlight cutting a nervous beam through the darkness, I stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the light, thick as a shroud. "All right," I muttered, my voice sounding small in the vast, empty space. "You want to play? Come on out. I'm here." The air instantly grew heavy, oppressive. A deep groan echoed from the very bones of the house, the walls seeming to breathe in and out around me. My heart hammered against my ribs, and then it happened. A single leather glove dropped from the ceiling, landing with a soft thud right at my feet. It was just a glove, but the way it lay there felt wrong. It twitched once, a sickening little spasm. Then, slowly, impossibly, the fingers began to curl one by one, forming a grotesque hand, as if it was reaching for me. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively going to my service weapon, the cold steel a small comfort. I drew it, the click of the safety echoing in the dead silence. "What do you want from me?" I yelled, my voice cracking. A voice whispered right behind me. It was soft, chillingly familiar. "To finish what you started." I spun around, my flashlight beam shaking wildly, and it landed on me. I was staring at myself. Same worn-out jacket, same sheriff's badge pinned to the chest, same tired, haunted face. But there was one horrifying difference. This other Ryan's hands were covered in slick, dark blood. He smiled, a twisted, knowing grin that didn't reach his cold eyes. "You forgot your gloves, partner." Before my mind could even process the words, before I could pull the trigger, the doppelganger lunged forward. The world dissolved into a cacophony of groaning wood and shattering glass, and then everything just went black. When I came to, I was lying on the damp floor, the flashlight a few feet away, its beam pointed at the ceiling. The other me was gone. The glove was gone. Was it a dream? A hallucination brought on by stress? I scrambled to my feet, my head pounding, and rushed out of that cursed house, not daring to look back. I drove all night, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and Willow Creek, but you can't outrun yourself. The next morning, I found it in my glove compartment, a single, blood-stained glove. His words echoed in my head. "You forgot your gloves, partner." I didn't understand. What did I start? What did I forget? The fear was replaced by a chilling realization. The monster wasn't just in the house. It was inside me, waiting. I had to go back. I had to know the truth, even if it meant confronting the darkest parts of myself. The story of Willow Creek wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. That's exactly what happened in the chilling case of Detective Ryan Carter. Let's rewind. For months, Ryan had been consumed by the Whispering Woods case, a string of disappearances that haunted the small town of Willow Creek. He was relentless, working day and night, convinced he was on the verge of a breakthrough. His last known communication was a cryptic text to his partner, the woods whisper back, "Going to Willow Creek. I know who it is." That was on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the silence was deafening. A welfare check was called in. 2 days after Ryan's message, officers pulled up to the old derelict house at the edge of Willow Creek. The air was heavy. Still, Ryan's unmarked sedan was parked haphazardly by the curb, the driver's side door eerily ajar, as if he'd left in a hurry. The engine was cold to the touch. The scene felt staged, a silent tableau of something gone terribly wrong. The officers approached the vehicle with caution, their footsteps crunching on the gravel, the only sound breaking the unsettling quiet. The real discovery, the one that would turn this from a missing person case into an enduring mystery, was waiting in the trunk. Inside the trunk, which was unlocked, sat a single, sealed evidence box. This was standard procedure for Ryan, but what was inside was anything but. The latch clicked open to reveal a pair of black leather gloves. They were pristine, except for one thing. Fresh crimson bloodstains smeared across the fingers of both. It was still wet. Whose blood was it? Was it Ryan's? The victims? The perpetrators? The questions multiplied with every passing second. But the gloves weren't the only clue left behind. As one of the officers scanned the surroundings, his flashlight beam caught something on the dusty porch of the abandoned house. Scrawled in the thick layer of dust on the wooden floorboards were 2 words, stark and clear: "Case closed." Was this a message from Ryan, a final, triumphant declaration that he'd solved the Whispering Woods disappearances? Or was it a taunt from the killer, a chilling sign-off after claiming another victim, the very detective hunting them? Ryan Carter was never seen again. The blood on the gloves was tested, but the results were sealed, buried in classified files. The disappearances in Willow Creek stopped. The case was officially closed, but for those who know the story, the questions remain. What really happened at the Willow Creek house? Did Ryan become the final piece of his own puzzle? We may never know. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.